what really happens in a midlife crisis is when human beings evolve from getting patterned when they were children to practicing their patterns to see how they work, to creating an identity from the patterns that they have created, to mastering those patterns and taking them on as an identity. That's the first half of human evolution. The next stage could be midlife crisis. That's when the individual recognizes at some level, either consciously or unconsciously, that their patterning isn't working anymore and it doesn't feel true to their heart. And they begin to question the programming and patterning of their life, which would include, you should be a millionaire, you should have a new car, you should have a red convertible, you should have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, an affair, a not affair, 10 children, 12 cars, a skyscraper, or whatever it is your culture and your programming says you should have. And when you get there and either accomplish it or get there and realize that none of those mean a hill of beans because there's something empty inside, people now first start to question all their circumstances. And then they start to look at, well, I didn't acquire this and I didn't become successful here. And I don't know what to do now, or I don't know what to do with myself, or I'm tired of sports, or I'm tired of drinking, or all these things are starting to get old and worn out because they have no meaning. And what's really happening in midlife crisis is that consciously or unconsciously, you are discovering your patterning is false. And it's empty, and it's shallow, and it's not enough, and it's not fulfilling. But you don't know what it is. At first you start to think it's you, so it becomes about you, and that's when it becomes a personal crisis. Because nobody's figured this out yet on the planet, so we're announcing it right now on the planet, so everybody knows. This is exactly what a midlife crisis is. It is nothing else, and everything else is secondary to this. So once the individual recognizes that there's an emptiness inside, they are actually seeing that their patterns are no longer effective at keeping them numb and dumb, no longer effective at keeping them happily distracted or sadly distracted. And now there tends to be this unfulfilled feeling within them, and there's a drive to find true fulfillment. And all it is that they're starting to see through their patterns and realize that their patterns are false and illusionary. And now where do I go becomes the question. And this is where they get lost, because nobody has the answers and everybody tries to give them something. Oh, go try a hobby. Go try painting. Go try dating. Go get divorced. Go have children. Go change your career. No, none of those are going to fulfill you, because that's not where the emptiness is. And that's just another form of reprogramming and repatterning in order to avoid seeing through the illusion of all of the programs you've had up till now.
And see who you really are.
Right.
Yes.
So, or not know who you are, so you're scared to even look. And that's why people freak out.
Yeah.
So let me distract myself. I'm going to have 2 girlfriends, 2 boyfriends. I'm going to go drinking every Saturday, and I'm going to do the crazy things that's in the comic books, you know. And none of those are going to fulfill you, and none of those have anything to do with this other stuff. It has purely to do with the programming, and its falsehoods are being revealed, and intuitively you know it, but you don't know what it is or why it's happening. And now you're reacting emotionally based upon an unconscious feeling that you can't explain, and neither can anybody else.
Beautifully said. That's great. I need to say something out loud.
Okay, say it out loud.
Ready?
I'm going to say it quietly.
So a child is in the family. They look at their parents. Let's say a young boy looks at his father, and this is how an adult man is. They lodge that in. It defines their future of what he should be like when he is an adult, a male. So then he gets to be between the ages of 30 and 65 and he's becoming a man and he is a man now acting out what he believed and perceived you're supposed to be when you're that age. So now you're in that space of this is the way I'm supposed to be. I have my family, I'm just, hypothetically saying family, work, all of this. And then they realize, then we get to what Michael just said, I really am not this. They wake up and they say, may have an epiphany. I am not all this. This was my father. I'm not my father. I want to be me. I've been programmed and to be the way I perceived a man should be as a child. So I'm following that, and I feel trapped. Midlife crisis happens, and now it's time to move on and be something else. So that's how I see it.
Yes,
what you just said.
Yes, and I would add to this as they stated in those definitions earlier that it's often about death and mortality. And people starting to see the end coming, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say that that's inaccurate also. All of these things they're saying can be included, but this is not where it stems from. That death and dying and mortality thing, yeah, okay, you might look at that, but that's because you don't know where to look for what's really going on. Nobody has taught you that it's the programming and the patterning that you're facing.
Bingo.
And you're seeing that it's an illusion.
Yes, bingo right there.
And so you start to look around for what might it be. Well, I'm going to die in 40 years, or I'm going to get old, and then all your fears come in, and then you make up stories, and then all these other things. And so are they true that they happen? Yes, but all they're talking about is the mind and how the mind runs rampant because it doesn't know what to do, and no one has directed it how to fix this.
So they start making up things, you're saying?
Yeah.
Ruminating and worrying?
So they create up stories to explain the anxiety that they're having so that everybody can be happy and think it's all good. Or they give them medication and then they're all good. No, get to the root of the problem. Stop with the darn medication. Medication is sometimes useful, but for the most part, it's a complete and utter waste of time except for poisoning the person's body.
Yeah.
And yes, are they going through an identity crisis? That would probably be the closest that the professionals get to a real definition is there is an identity crisis, and you are absolutely correct. That is because the individual has realized that the identity that they're living up till now is not theirs.
Right.
And they don't know why, they don't know how, but they do know that it's unfulfilling. It doesn't answer questions, it doesn't give them what they want, and so they are having an identity crisis. But it's not about calming them down and telling them they have a good identity or creating a new one. It's about going within and discovering your true essence and your connection to your self-love. When you get there, then the real identity surfaces, and then you recognize that all of your identities up until this point have been misunderstandings, and they're actually roles. R-O-L-E-S. They're roles you played in life. They are not an identity, but you mistook them for an identity. So when you started to realize that they were all fake or they would all end, then all of a sudden there's a panic, because who am I? Who will I be? What will I do? Well, I guess I'm just going to die, so I guess it's near-death experiences coming up, and they panic.
But it's what that child perceived and what a male should be. So when they grow up, they were that male.
Or a female, yes.
Or I'm just giving
or
an
whatever
example.
they created.
And I gave that example for a reason, because now
Okay.
the male's the adult, and he's doing his thing. And he's feeling like the midlife crisis. So let's say a wife says to him, honey, no, you did well. You supported our family and you did this. Yeah, he did everything
Right, that he's
that
programmed to do.
programmed to
Sure.
do, and the
Right.
identity thing. So he has the right to do the midlife crisis, but not be crazy and do rash things like I'm going to leave now, or I'm going to cheat, or I'm going to no. He has the right to say I'm not fulfilled. Well, guess what? You will be fulfilled when you go back and you look at that childhood and you see what you perceived and believed and what you were trained. But Michael, you're right. You were not taught to do things differently.
I wonder how many people, if left on their own, would choose to do all the things people do in their culture. So if you
What do
weren't
mean?
told that you had to grow up and raise children and have babies and have a car or have a house or have a job or have a business, how many people would do that? Well, let me tell you, probably zero. And if they did it, it was by accident or because it suited their needs. And let me tell you the generation that's proving this to be fact.
Oh, yeah.
The millennials.
They are.
The famous millennials. Let me tell you what, they have some really awesome concepts and really awesome ideas. They just don't know quite how to interface with society as it is today.
Not all of them, right?
But let me tell you, they got the right idea. This is about them. It's about doing it their way. Who needs a job? Why do you need a job? Why do we have to have jobs? Why can't we sustain ourselves? There's plenty of wealth in the world. There's plenty of resources in the world. Why do we have to go to work to support some corporation so that we can support ourselves? This makes no sense. I want time for myself.
Yeah, why can't I make up an idea and then create it and go to a cafe on my laptop and then create the business on it? This is like complete creativity. Can I just do that?
So,
but they have problems. Some of them, problems with the
well,
interfacing.
come on, let's face it.
Half.
There's a great majority of them that do. And for those of you who are listening that don't worry about it. Ignore what I just said. For those of you who do, listen to what I just said and try and polish it up so that you can make it easier for yourself.
Yeah.
It's not about conforming, it's about interfacing. And so if you take it as we're just talking about interfacing makes your life easier, not conforming makes your life easier.
There we go.
Conforming actually makes your life harder. So interface, not conform.
That's it.
And they have a beautiful idea, and probably I'll bet none of those would do the standard cultural programming unless it was sheer by accident, because they're so different. They're so unique in their way of being.
It leads back to the cultural
right. Yep.
programming that we talked about. Isn't that funny?
And so, yes, I think that when they help people with midlife crisis, they're missing the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And up to this point, I haven't met anybody who either agrees. I've had plenty that disagree with what I've said, but I haven't met many that agree with what I'm saying or even understand it, especially in the professional field. If you could recognize that the person is having a crisis because the programming has run its course.
Mm-hmm. Right there.
And the programming is no longer strong enough to create the illusion that they are this role or identity. That strength is dissipating, and they are starting to see through the illusion of their programming and know something's missing at the core of who they are. It's not about mortality. It's not about cars or women or men or businesses. Oh, yeah, you can make it all that, and people do. That's just a distraction. That isn't what it's about. And if you could get to their core of who they are and really teach them to go inward, get in touch with themselves, and get that inner strength we were talking about, and not empowerment, if they could develop that inner strength, their midlife crisis would go away.
Yeah.
It would disappear. They wouldn't even have to get. In fact, once they really understood what was going on, even their mortality issues would start to go away.
Right, and enjoy the rest of life.
Right.
You know,
They would flourish.
So, right. And so what are the indicators? The indicators are when you say things like, I don't know what's missing in my life. There's something missing and I'm not happy. And
Right.
then you could even drop down into a depression. So those people that are listening to us right now, look at that. Look at your
Where
identity,
I feel empty.
where you feel empty.
I don't know who I am anymore. I don't recognize my wife, husband,
Good.
children, I need something in my life, but I don't know what it is. I want something in my life, but I can't explain it. I can't grasp it. I can't talk about it. There's just something missing, and I know it's missing. And they'll even talk about the fear of death or their mortality. But here's the other thing about mortality and death that nobody has said yet, is that it is the old identity's fear of death, meaning that the person is going to realize that they aren't that identity and that they are something more. And so the identity, which is an aspect, actually has its own fear of death.
So when that's
Because
worked
it
on,
knows that the identity is going to be removed or dissolved, because it knows intuitively, or they know intuitively, that this is going to be removed. They don't know who they're going to be because the new identity hasn't been birthed, or their connection to their true self hasn't been birthed. So they think they're dying. And so it becomes about life and death. So they do crazy stuff so that they can get away with it, so that they can feel fulfilled and get life. And all it is the identity perceiving its own end. And nobody has discovered that yet. This is not a death. This is not mortality. It is the mortality of a false identity being recognized by its owner, and its owner not yet being conscious. So there's a demise coming. It can feel it, it can smell it, it can taste it, but it doesn't know what to do with it. And the owner of it is not conscious enough yet, and society isn't conscious enough yet, and the professionals aren't conscious enough yet. So they assume the person is fearing death, because how else do you explain it? But it's not. It's a separate aspect of the individual fearing its demise and knowing that it's coming, simply meaning that it knows it's going to be reprogrammed, needs to be reprogrammed, and it's not going to exist anymore in its same shape or form.
that's beautiful. So before you decide to act out on these emotions and feelings, right? You want to look at what Michael just said. You don't want to act out and then have consequences. You want to look at the identity of what you created all this time in a certain situation, from your childhood beliefs and perceptions.
Right.
That's just awesome.
Yes. And if you get what I said, and it's worked every single time for every single person I've worked with.
Yes.
And when you get that and you help them develop that, their midlife crisis ends. It no longer exists, and they move on like it never happened.
Yeah.